and cognitive disability levels. First level is automatic actions. So this one, the client requires total cognitive assistance. Their attention is going to be very limited. They're going to use subliminal internal cues. Motor actions are going to be in response to one word near reflexive directions. For example, saying sip instead of saying like take a sip of your water, you would just say sip. Keep it very simple, one word, so that they can follow a simple motor command. The client's going to need monitoring to ensure adequate nutrition. They're going to require assistance with ambulation, with transfers, pretty much anything they're going to need. They're going to be dependent on their caregiver for, including completing their ADLs. They're going to need assistance with passive active range of motion in order to prevent bed sores, because at this point in level 1 they're going to be bedridden. Also to prevent osteoporosis infections and contractures. The environment should be consistent, familiar, and modified in order to elicit an orienting experience. So at level 1, for them to be somewhat oriented, their environment needs to be familiar to them. Clients require constant 24-hour supervision, and this level is terminal. So level 1 is like the final stage. So it's a little bit backwards. I think of it like the Ranchos levels. They started 1 and progress up, 1 being the worst. So Allen cognitive levels are just the same. 1 is the worst, and they progress to the most improved. All right, level 2 is postural actions. The client requires max cognitive assist. So they moved from being total assist to max assist in level 2. The client's thinking is very disorganized at this level. Their attention is going to be mostly internal cues, so they're going to respond a lot to what's going on internally versus the external environment. Their motor actions are still one step. They do a lot of imitative behaviors, especially when it comes to like ADLs. So they can imitate their caregiver doing an ADL. So for instance, if you take out a rag and wash your face, they might imitate the steps to wash their face. Their actions are very reflexive. They do familiar things, and it's going to be a lot of just gross motor patterning. Spontaneous behaviors are common at this stage in level 2. They are able to now eat finger foods. If you remember in level 1, they were dependent with feeding. Now they can at least do a little bit of finger food eating. And one thing to be aware of at this point, they often do wander. So you want to think of strategies to help decrease wandering, like kind of hiding doors in the background, that kind of thing. Clients should be taken to the restroom every 2 hours in order to avoid incontinence, and the client requires around-the-clock supervision for safety. So level 2, they are still max assist, and they're going to need a lot of assistance with those daily things, but they're able to do a little bit more than they were in level 1. Level 3 is manual actions. At this point, you're moving from total to max to now mod. So total in level 1, max in level 2, and mod in level 3. Their attention should be directed to tactile cues, so familiar things to them. The goals are not related to outcomes at this point. Their motor actions are limited, again, still one step, familiar, and now action-oriented activities. They cannot learn new behaviors at this point, so no new learning is going to happen at level 3. They are going to engage in adapted activities in order to reinforce the connection between predictable tactile effects on the environment and client actions. So examples of this are walking, washing a car, drying or washing dishes, wiping countertops, that kind of thing. These activities are very kind of familiar. You can adapt them to make them easier for them to engage in. At this point, at level 3, the client's going to need a lot of structure and routine, and you're going to want to avoid sensory overload at this point. The client is able to wash their hands and face and brush their teeth. They're going to be able to do some grooming and bathing, but items should be presented one at a time. So if you're doing a bathing activity, instead of handing them the rag, the soap, the shampoo, everything is presented one thing at a time to keep it more concrete and always in sequential order in order to avoid confusion. Still, at this point at level 3, they're going to require 24-hour supervision. Moving on to level 4, goal-directed activity. Now they moved from the previous level of mod assist with cognitive. Now they are min assist with cognitive. Their attention is directed now to visual and tactile cues. If you remember in level 3, their attention was mostly directed towards tactile cues, like familiar things. Now you can add more of a visual component as well as tactile. The client is able to understand cause and effect. So if I do this, then this will happen. They still can't problem solve at this point at level 4. There's no problem solving occurring. And now they can do 2 or 3 step activities. If you remember, all of the previous levels before level 4 were all 1 step. So now they can do 2 step or maybe even 3 step. Activities should be simple, concrete, and supportive of desired social roles. So still keep everything very simple, very structured. Pictures and labels are really helpful at this point in level 4. They can be used as reminders to assist the person. So for instance, if they're in an assisted living facility, putting their picture on the door with their name on it so that they know that that's their room. Task setup is required for bathing and grooming, but they're able to do it a little more independently now at level 4 if they're helped with some setup. They can now eat independently, but supervision is still needed so they eat the right amount of food, so they don't just take a few bites and stop. The client's going to need protection against safety hazards. They're still going to wander at level 4, so therefore they're still going to require 24-hour supervision. So still 24-hour supervision in order to keep them safe and from wandering off. All right, almost done. Level 5 is exploratory actions. So this one, the caregiver is now standby or supervision for cognitive assist. And again, we move from min to standby or supervision. The client learns through visible, concrete, and meaningful stimuli. External cueing can now be used. The client explores the effects of self-initiated motor actions on physical objects. So kind of like the cause and effect that we talked about in level 4. Now they're going to be able to explore their effect on the environment through their self-initiated movements. The client uses a trial and error problem solving now. So at level 5, exploratory, you're now going to see some problem solving. So they're going to engage in an activity, they're going to do it wrong, but then they're going to do it again, and eventually they're going to figure out what's the right way to go about it. The client can now follow a 4 to 5 step process and learn new concrete ideas. Remember, in level 4 here, the client was able to do a 2 to 3 step activity. So now we're upgrading to a 4 to 5 step, and they can not only engage in problem solving, but they can also learn new ideas, as long as those ideas are not abstract, very concrete, simple ideas. The client has difficulty with judging, reasoning, planning, semantic memory, and episodic memory. So if you think of, for instance, someone with dementia, they're often going to have some difficulty with their memory, things from their past, things of that nature. So you'll see that here at level 5. The client's abilities include performing dressing, eating, grooming without assistance. So now at level 5, they do require supervision, but it's no longer 24-hour. So they're able to do some of these things on their own. They're not going to need help from a caregiver. And then lastly, moving on to level 6, planned activities or planned actions. The client is now independent. You don't even notice that there is a disability. So again, you move from level 1 being most disabled to level 6 being independent. And then I'm just going to briefly go over some things about group dynamics for each group. For level 1, which is, remember, dependent, participants, they're not going to benefit from the use of dynamics of a group. So group activities are not going to be effective at level 1. Remember, they're bedridden. They're dependent with all all activities for the most part. Level 2, so moving down from automatic to postural, level 2, participants will be successful in situations in which they can move about and copy movements that are modeled. So they can, again, similar to what we talked about up here. Level 2, remember, they're good with familiar gross motor patterns, so they can kind of imitate what they see. Level 3, participants focus on elements of repetition and manipulation. Level 4, participants work on goal-directed activities. They can now do like crafting projects. Very, very simple, low-level crafting projects can begin at level 4. That is key for a lot of questions they'll ask about at what point can they engage in a group craft activity. That is level 4, also known as goal-directed. All right, at level 5, exploratory, they can engage in activities with graded structure. So still a craft activity, but a little more difficult. So maybe some clay modeling or a mosaic project. The activities are going to allow them to exercise control over a medium and require them to control their impulses. An example of this is if they're having difficulty placing the tiles for a mosaic project within the boundaries that they're supposed to, they'll feel an urge to like smash it or destroy it, but they have to control the impulse if they want to get the final product. So those are just some examples of what these would look like for group activities. Remember, level 4, they can start to do like a group craft. Level 5, they can do a more structured group craft. And then 3, it's just going to be more of repetitive manipulation type thing.